The city always seemed a little quieter when the billionaire CEO walked into a room. People said it was because of her confidence. Others whispered that it was fear. Whatever the reason, the effect was always the same. Voices softened. Eyes dropped. People straightened their backs and tried not to make mistakes. No one wanted to be the one who upset her. She had built her company from the ground up. At first, she had been kind and patient. But as the years went by and the business grew, pressure followed her everywhere. Meetings, numbers, deadlines, investors, problems that never stopped coming. Somewhere along the way, her tone became sharper. Her words became heavier. When something went wrong, she didn't sigh and forgive. She demanded answers. She demanded perfection. And nobody wanted to disappoint her. Her staff respected her, but it was a respect mixed with worry. They practiced every word before speaking to her. They checked every email 3 times. No one wanted to be in the room when she was unhappy. Even when she smiled, people wondered if they had done something wrong. One evening, after a full day of meetings that stretched into the night, she decided to take her small leadership team to dinner. She chose a restaurant that was known for being calm, quiet, and private. She liked that. She needed somewhere she could sit down without being asked questions every second. Somewhere she could think. The restaurant staff noticed her the moment she walked in. Not because she demanded attention, but because her presence drew it. The manager recognized her face from the news and quietly told the team, "Serve that table carefully. She's important." A young waitress was assigned to the table. She worked long shifts most days, but she always tried to stay kind and calm. She had learned that people came in with their own problems, and sometimes the best thing she could do was simply treat them gently. She didn't know much about the CEO. She only knew this was a guest like any other, and she wanted to do her job well. The CEO sat down with her team, but the tension didn't leave her shoulders. She still thought about the meeting that had gone wrong earlier. One contract hadn't gone through. Someone had sent the wrong file. Someone else had been late. She carried all of it with her like a weight she couldn't put down. Her team tried to relax, but they kept glancing at her face, trying to read her mood. They ordered simple meals. Nobody asked for anything complicated. They didn't even joke with each other like they sometimes did. They were careful. The waitress walked over with a small smile. She greeted them politely and handed out menus. She didn't rush them. She didn't talk too much. She just made sure they had water and enough time to decide. To her, this was just another table that deserved good service. But the CEO noticed everything. If the water glass wasn't filled fast enough, she noticed. If the fork was placed a little unevenly, she noticed. She didn't shout or insult anyone, but her tone was cold and exact. When she asked a question, it felt like a test. "Is this dish gluten-free?" she asked. "Yes," the waitress said, still calm. "Are you sure?" The CEO asked again, her voice slightly sharper. The waitress didn't panic. She simply checked again with the kitchen, then returned with the answer. "Yes, it is." The CEO nodded but did not say thank you. She wasn't trying to be rude. She had simply forgotten how to soften her words. The pressure of her world had made politeness feel optional. Around them, other guests continued eating, laughing, and enjoying the evening. The restaurant had warm lighting and soft music. Yet at that table, everything still felt tight and serious. The CEO's phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Another problem. Another message needing her attention. She sighed. The sound was small, but her team noticed. They shifted in their seats, worried about what might come next. The waitress returned to take the food order. She listened carefully. One person ordered pasta. Another asked for soup. The CEO requested a special change to her meal, something not usually done. "Let me check if the kitchen can do that for you," the waitress said simply. The CEO looked at her for a moment. She wasn't used to hearing uncertainty. In her world, she gave commands and people followed. But the waitress was not being rude. She was just being honest. A few minutes later, the waitress came back and politely explained that the change wasn't possible, but offered another option. The CEO paused. She wasn't angry, but she also didn't like being told no. Her tone cooled even more. "I don't think you understand," she said slowly. "I expect things done a certain way." The waitress nodded respectfully. She did understand. But she also had rules she needed to follow. She calmly repeated the options the kitchen could do instead. Something in that moment showed a small truth. The CEO controlled a large world. But here, in this quiet restaurant, not everything bent to her will. It wasn't a battle. It was just life happening the way it normally does. The CEO agreed to the closest option without saying much else. Her team stayed silent. The waitress carried on with her work, helping other tables, smiling when needed, answering questions with patience. While waiting for the food, the CEO looked around the restaurant. She saw families sharing meals, couples laughing, friends talking freely. No one seemed afraid of each other. No one weighed every word before speaking. For a brief moment, she felt like she was on the outside of something simple and warm. She wondered when her own life had stopped feeling like that. She had once gone to small cafes with nothing but a notebook and a cheap cup of coffee. Back then, she dreamed big but lived small. She remembered long nights working and telling herself that one day, life would be easier. She thought success would bring peace. But success had brought noise, expectations, eyes watching her every move, fear in the faces of people who worked for her. And she had started to accept that fear as normal. The food came. The waitress set each plate down carefully. She didn't rush. She didn't drop anything. She simply did her job with quiet pride. The CEO watched her for a moment longer than usual, though she didn't know why. Dinner went on. Conversations stayed safe and professional. No one joked too much. No one relaxed completely. Even in a restaurant meant for rest, the CEO carried her world with her like a shadow. What she didn't know yet was that the same quiet waitress, who didn't seem important to anyone else, would soon be the one person who spoke to her in a way nobody else dared to. Not cruelly, not loudly, but honestly. And that simple honesty would make the CEO feel something she hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not power, but a soft and unexpected sense of being seen. For now, though, part 1 ends with the calm before that moment. A powerful woman sits in a quiet restaurant. A kind waitress moves from table to table, doing her work with grace. And somewhere between them, an unseen line waits to be crossed. Not for drama or conflict, but for a small human truth that will change the way the CEO sees herself, and the way others see her too. The waitress had learned, over time, that the best way to handle difficult guests was to stay steady. People came in carrying invisible weight on their shoulders, and sometimes that weight spilled into their words. She didn't blame them. Life wasn't always easy, so she tried to be patient, even when someone spoke a little too sharply or expected a little too much. She noticed the CEO's tension the way you might notice a storm cloud in the distance. You don't have to look up to know it's there. You can feel it. The CEO's shoulders were stiff. Her tone was tight. Her eyes stayed focused, always measuring, never quite resting. The team at the table barely spoke above a soft murmur, as if someone might scold them for being too relaxed. The waitress didn't change her style because of that. She greeted them the same as anyone else. She listened carefully. She didn't hurry, but she didn't waste time either. She gave space for them to exist like regular people, not powerful figures. After the meals were served, she made a quiet round through her section, checking on each table. When she arrived back at the CEO's table, she spoke gently. "Is everything okay with your meals?" Most of the team nodded politely and thanked her. The CEO simply said, "It's fine." But the word came out flat, as if she refused to give any more than that. The waitress smiled anyway and stepped away. She had seen this before. Some people used warmth like a shield. Others used distance. She didn't judge either one. As the evening went on, the restaurant grew busier. A family laughed at a corner table. A couple whispered softly to each other near the window. A group of friends clinked glasses and shared stories. The waitress moved between them smoothly, always aware of the CEO's table in her mind. Like a small note she kept remembering. At the CEO's table, the mood never changed. Even eating didn't relax them. Forks moved, glasses lifted, but conversation stayed stiff, like everyone had invisible strings pulling them straight. The CEO asked the waitress for small things now and then. Extra napkins, a change in her drink, a different sauce on the side. Each request was stated like a command, not a question. The waitress could feel that the CEO wasn't trying to be unkind. She simply lived in a world where everything was expected to move quickly around her. Still, the waitress kept her own pace. Calm, kind, proper. At one point, the CEO dropped a piece of food from her fork, and it landed near the edge of the plate, staining the tablecloth slightly. It wasn't a big deal, but the CEO frowned like the tablecloth had personally failed her. "Can we get this replaced?" she asked, not looking up. The waitress nodded. "Of course, I'll take care of it." She didn't rush, but she didn't delay. She brought over a clean cloth, changed it with quiet skill, and reset the place setting. The CEO watched carefully, as if waiting for a mistake. None came. "Thank you," one of the team members said softly to the waitress. The CEO didn't say anything, but she noticed something. The waitress never once showed annoyance. No tight smile, no sigh, no rolling eyes, just patient, steady service. It almost felt unusual. Someone who cared about doing their job well, without trying to impress or resist. There was a moment, small and almost invisible, when their eyes met. The CEO expected to see fear there, the same nervousness she saw in her staff at the office. Instead, she saw something else. Calm understanding, as if the waitress was saying, without words, "I see that you're human, even when you forget that I am too." The CEO looked away quickly. The waitress kept working, but inside, she thought about the CEO. She wondered what life must be like at that level. Always watched, always judged, always expected to be more than everyone else. Sometimes, when she had a heavy day, she felt tired just from smiling. She couldn't imagine carrying the weight of a giant company. Yet she also saw how the CEO spoke to her team. The way they sat up straighter when she looked at them. The way they laughed a little too politely. Fear wasn't healthy to live with every day. It hollowed out moments that should have been warm. A little later, the restaurant grew louder. A fresh group arrived with happy voices and the kind of relaxed energy that fills a room. The CEO's table sat in the middle of it all like a quiet island. The waitress passed by and heard one of the team members ask the CEO a question about work. Even here, away from the office, they were careful, cautious. The CEO answered in a tone that was correct, but sharp enough to cut off any follow-up. The waitress thought about how simple words can feel like walls. She returned with refills, placing each glass gently. When she reached the CEO, she said, "Here you go." In the same warm way she spoke to everyone. The CEO paused then. Not long, just a heartbeat. It surprised her that someone would sound that kind to her without wanting anything back. She nodded slightly. "Thank you." It was the first soft word she'd said all evening. But the calm didn't last long. A small mistake happened at another table, and the waitress had to hurry to fix it. She walked a bit faster than usual, focused but not stressed. When she finished helping the other guests, she returned to the CEO's table to check in again. This time, the CEO had a comment ready. "The dish I ordered wasn't prepared the way I requested," she said, not angrily but firmly. "This keeps happening to me when I go out. I don't know why people struggle to listen." The words hung there for a moment. The team members kept quiet. No one wanted to join the conversation. The waitress listened fully before responding. She didn't jump in. She didn't defend herself. She made sure the CEO felt heard first. Then she spoke gently. "I'm really sorry it didn't come out exactly how you wanted," she said. "I know it's frustrating when things don't match your expectations. Let me see what I can do to make it better." Her voice wasn't scared. It wasn't sarcastic. It was honest, caring, grounded. The CEO blinked. She wasn't used to people responding to her that way. Usually they rushed. They explained nervously. They tried to please her as quickly as possible. But this waitress met her calmly, like two equal humans sharing a small problem in the middle of a busy night. The waitress took the plate back, spoke quietly to the kitchen, and made sure the adjustment was handled kindly. She didn't complain. She didn't roll her eyes. She didn't gossip in the corner. She simply helped, which, surprisingly, made the CEO feel something unfamiliar. She felt slightly embarrassed. Not because the waitress scolded her. Not because anyone judged her. But because the kindness made her see how sharp her own tone had been. She had to face the fact that she sometimes expected the world to bend without remembering there were people holding it up. When the corrected dish came out, the waitress set it down carefully. "Thank you for your patience," she said softly. The CEO swallowed. She almost said, "Of course," in her usual flat way, but the words stuck. Instead, something a little warmer appeared. "Thank you," she replied, and this time it sounded real. The team noticed. Their shoulders relaxed, just slightly. A small shift like a window opening to let fresh air in. The rest of the meal passed without drama. But inside, a quiet change had begun. The CEO found herself watching the waitress. Not with judgment, with curiosity. Who was this calm person who didn't bend or break, but also didn't harden? Someone who stood in front of stress and chose to respond with simple kindness? The CEO had once been like that. At the same time, the waitress didn't think of herself as special. She simply believed that people deserved to be treated gently, especially when they forgot how to be gentle themselves. Maybe they needed it the most. As plates were cleared and coffee was served to those who wanted it, the invisible line between powerful boss and everyday worker began to blur, just a little. No big speech, no dramatic moment, just the slow realization that, underneath titles and pressure and expectations, people were still just people. The CEO didn't know yet that the real turning point was coming soon. A single sentence from the waitress would open a mirror the CEO had avoided looking into for years. And when she finally saw herself clearly, she wouldn't feel angry. She would feel human, and that would change everything. The evening was starting to calm down in the restaurant. The rush had passed. The music played softly again, and the kitchen noise softened into a gentle rhythm. The CEO's table was still there, sitting in the middle of the room like a quiet island. Empty plates had been taken away. Cups of coffee and tea had replaced the main dishes. The team spoke a little more now, but only in small doses, like they were afraid the peace might break. The waitress continued moving around the room, but she always had a sense of where that table was, even when she wasn't looking at it. Years of serving people had taught her to feel things without staring. She knew when someone needed something. She knew when to step forward and when to give space. She wasn't perfect, but she cared. And most of the time that was enough. The CEO watched her from time to time, quietly. Not in a cold way. Not in a judgmental way. More like someone trying to understand a picture they had seen many times but never really studied. She noticed how the waitress bent slightly when talking to older guests, making them feel comfortable. She noticed how she laughed softly with a group of friends without being loud or distracting. She noticed how she never rushed but still managed to be everywhere she needed to be. It was strange. The CEO led thousands of people. She managed millions of dollars. Yet here, this one person seemed to move the whole room without force, without status, without power. Just kindness and steady presence. After a while, the CEO placed her cup down and looked around as if searching for something. The waitress noticed and walked over gently. "Would you like anything else?" she asked. The CEO hesitated. It was a small pause, but it mattered. Usually she spoke right away. Orders, directions, decisions. But this question wasn't about control. It was about care. "No," the CEO said softly. "Everything is fine." The words sounded almost unfamiliar in her own mouth. Fine, calm, simple. The waitress smiled. "If you need anything, I'm here." She turned to leave, but before she could step away, the CEO suddenly spoke again. "Wait." The waitress stopped and looked back at her with the same open expression. The CEO searched for the right words. She was not used to asking questions about feelings. She usually stayed on safe topics like business and strategy. But something inside her felt restless. "Do you ever feel like people expect too much from you?" the CEO asked. It wasn't said in a dramatic way. It was quiet, honest, almost fragile. The team at the table froze inside. They weren't used to hearing their boss speak like that. Not at work. Not in public. Not ever. The waitress thought for a second. She didn't rush an answer. She wanted to respect the weight behind the question. Sometimes, she said, people come in tired or upset. They expect me to fix their day with a smile. I try my best. But I'm human too. The CEO nodded slowly. The words touched something real inside her. The waitress continued gently. But I also know that people carry heavy stories. So when someone is sharp with me, I try not to take it to heart. It's not always about me. Her tone wasn't meant to correct or teach. It was simply her truth. The CEO let out a small breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Then came the moment that would change things. The CEO looked up and said, half to herself, people fear me, even when I'm not trying to be scary. The waitress didn't answer right away. She chose her words carefully. She wasn't intimidated, but she also wasn't careless. She wanted to speak in a way that honored both of them. I don't think people fear you, she said softly. I think they fear how they feel around you. The CEO frowned slightly, not out of anger, but curiosity. What do you mean? The waitress met her eyes calmly. When someone is always serious and strong, others feel like they can't make mistakes near them. They feel judged. They stop being themselves. And then it feels like fear. Not of you, but of how small they feel beside you. The CEO went quiet. The restaurant noise faded into the background. Even the team members felt the depth of the moment. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was simply honest. The CEO looked down at her hands. For years she had worn strength like armor. It helped her win deals. It helped her lead. It protected her from being questioned or doubted. But she had never thought about the side effect, how that armor might make others feel invisible. The waitress added gently, you don't seem like a bad person, just someone who forgot that people need softness too. There it was. Not an insult. Not an attack. Just truth. And because it was spoken with kindness, it didn't stab. It opened. The CEO felt a warm wave of something she had not let herself feel in a long time. Humility. She could feel her face grow slightly warm. She didn't feel angry. She didn't feel defensive. She felt seen. Seen beyond her title. Beyond her power. Beyond the image she carried around like a heavy coat. One of the team members almost held their breath. They had never heard anyone speak to their boss like that. Not in a meeting. Not in private. Certainly not in a restaurant from someone they had just met. The CEO finally spoke, but her voice sounded different now. Do I really come across that way? She asked. The waitress didn't rush. She nodded gently. Sometimes. But that doesn't mean you want to. It just means maybe no one has told you. The truth sank in quietly. No one had told her. People agreed with her. People followed her. People avoided upsetting her. But no one had simply told her the human truth. The CEO sat back in her chair and thought about her life. The long days. The endless pressure. The way she had trained herself not to show weakness. The way she believed that softness would cost her respect. And now here she was, realizing the respect she thought she commanded might actually be fear wrapped in silence. For the first time in a long time, she saw herself from the outside. She saw a powerful woman who had forgotten what it felt like to simply be kind without guarding herself. To smile without checking if it was strategic. To listen without planning a reply. To allow mistakes. To allow softness. The waitress didn't push further. She simply placed the bill on the table and said, "Take your time. I'll be right here if you need me." Then she walked away. Not dramatically. Not triumphantly. Just peacefully. The CEO watched her go. Her team watched the CEO. No one quite knew what to say. The air felt lighter but also deeper. Like a quiet truth had settled over the table. After a long silence, one of the team members spoke softly. "She's right, you know?" The CEO didn't snap back. She didn't defend herself. She didn't deny it. She just nodded. "I know," she whispered. And for the first time, they didn't see the CEO everyone feared. They saw a woman. Tired, capable, strong, but also human. finally realizing that the world didn't need her to be cold to respect her. Maybe they thought kindness could be powerful too. The evening moved on. The restaurant lights softened. People paid their checks and headed out into the night. But inside the CEO's mind, something had shifted forever. A mirror had been placed in front of her, and for once, she wasn't afraid to look. And the person who held that mirror? A simple waitress, with gentle eyes and steady hands, who believed that truth delivered with kindness could change people. She had no idea how deeply her words had landed, but the CEO did, and she would remember them. The CEO went home that night with the waitress's words still circling in her mind. Usually, after a long day, she would mentally sort through numbers, meetings, unfinished plans, and problems waiting for tomorrow. But this time, her thoughts kept returning to one simple sentence. People don't fear you. They fear how they feel around you. It echoed softly, almost like a bell ringing somewhere far away. When she reached her apartment, the lights turned on with the press of a button. The space was beautiful and expensive, full of clean lines and perfect furniture. Everything was in order. Everything looked just right. But as she stood there, she realized how quiet it always was. No laughter, no casual conversation, no warmth, just silence. She set her bag on the table and sat down, still in her work clothes. She didn't even take off her shoes at first. She just stared ahead, seeing nothing, while the memory of the waitress's calm voice played again and again. Had she really become someone people tiptoed around? Someone who filled rooms with pressure instead of comfort? She didn't like the idea. Not because of pride, but because of sadness. She had worked so hard to build a life that mattered. She had wanted respect, yes, but she had never planned to build fear. She thought back to her early days. Back when she was still climbing, still learning, still unsure of herself. She remembered the mentors who had treated her kindly. The coworkers who had laughed with her during long nights at the office. Back then, people were not afraid of her. They believed in her. Somewhere along the journey, belief had turned into caution. And caution had hardened into fear. She leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. She pictured the waitress again. Steady, kind, grounded. There was no judgment in her eyes. Just honesty. And somehow that honesty had done what power never could. It had reached her heart. The next morning, she arrived at the office earlier than usual. The building, tall and shiny, reflected the sunrise. She walked through the lobby, noticing the way the guards straightened up as she passed. The receptionist smiled nervously. Even the elevator seemed to tense up. It wasn't their fault. They were reacting to the energy she carried. When she stepped onto her floor, people scattered like birds avoiding a shadow. They pretended they were simply busy, but she could see the small changes. Quiet voices, careful movements, polite smiles with tight edges. She never noticed this so clearly before. Now she did. Her assistant walked up, holding a tablet with the day's schedule. Normally, the assistant spoke quickly and professionally, careful not to waste a second. But today, the CEO said something different. "Good morning. How are you today?" The assistant blinked in surprise. It wasn't that the CEO had been rude before, just distant, cold, efficient. This small question felt like sunlight. I'm fine. Thank you," the assistant replied slowly. The CEO nodded. Good. It was a simple exchange. But it meant more than it looked. Meetings began as usual. Reports, charts, deadlines. People spoke carefully, glancing at her face to see how she reacted. Normally, when someone stumbled over a word or made a tiny mistake, she would feel her patience tighten. Today, she noticed the fear first. Halfway through the morning, one employee mixed up two numbers while presenting. The room froze. Everyone waited for the CEO to respond. She paused. Then she said, in a calm voice, "It's okay. Just correct it and continue." The employee almost looked shocked. The CEO felt strange. Not weak, not smaller, just lighter. And she realized that for years, she had been carrying the wrong idea. She thought that kindness would cost her control. But now she saw that control built on fear was fragile. Real respect came from trust, and trust needed room to breathe. During lunch, instead of eating alone at her desk with her door closed, she went to the company cafeteria. This was unheard of. People noticed as soon as she walked in. She took a tray, ordered a simple meal, and sat at an empty table. But the emptiness didn't last long. One of her managers, after several seconds of quiet inner debate, slowly walked over and asked, "May I join you?" She nodded. Of course. They talked, not about numbers or deadlines but about life, family, hobbies, the human parts of a person that never fit into a spreadsheet. As the manager spoke, the CEO listened, really listened, and she realized something else. She had spent so long being strong that she had forgotten how to connect. That night, after work, she found herself thinking again about the waitress, about the mirror that conversation had held up to her life. She didn't feel angry. She didn't feel attacked. She felt grateful. Grateful that someone had cared enough to speak honestly. Days passed, and the change was small but steady. People relaxed a little more during meetings. Jokes appeared, soft ones at first, then real laughter. Her team began to talk about ideas without fear of every wrong guess being punished. And she found that the more she softened, the more creative and open her workplace became. Her leadership didn't disappear. It grew. She still made decisions. She still guided the company. But now she also made space for others to be human. One afternoon, she sat in her office alone, watching the city through the glass. Cars moved like tiny lines of light. People walked along the sidewalks with their own stories, their own worries, their own dreams. And she thought about the way power can lift people or crush them. She decided she wanted to lift. That's when another thought came to her. She needed to go back to the restaurant. Not to correct anything. Not to prove anything. Just to say thank you. So a few days later, she returned. Not with her whole team this time. Not after a long, stressful meeting. She came quietly, almost shyly, during a slower part of the evening. The restaurant looked the same: warm lights, soft music, a gentle hum of voices. The waitress was there, moving with the same calm energy. When she saw the CEO, her expression didn't change into fear or excitement. She just smiled, the same kind, steady smile as before. "Welcome back," she said. "Table for one?" "Yes," the CEO replied softly. She was seated near the window. The waitress brought water and a menu. They exchanged a few simple words. Nothing dramatic, nothing heavy. But inside, the CEO was building courage. After ordering, she looked up and said quietly, "Can I ask you something?" The waitress nodded. "Do you remember what you said to me the other night?" The waitress thought for a moment, then smiled gently. "I remember the conversation." The CEO took a slow breath. "It stayed with me. It made me realize how I've been living, how people feel around me, and I wanted to thank you." The waitress didn't react with surprise. She didn't act proud. She simply listened, giving the CEO the same safe space she had before. "You spoke to me honestly," the CEO continued, "but you were kind. And because of that, I could hear you." The waitress answered quietly, "Sometimes truth only works when you give it gently. Otherwise it feels like a weapon." The CEO nodded. "You're right." They shared a small smile. Two people from different worlds, one leading a giant company, the other serving tables. Yet, in that moment, equal in the most important way. As the meal went on, the CEO felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the peace that comes from control. The peace that comes from connection. She looked around the restaurant again, the families, the couples, the friends, and realized that success wasn't just about numbers or empires or impressive headlines. Success was also about how you treated the people who crossed your path each day. And she promised herself she wouldn't forget that again. The night ended quietly. No big speeches. No public confession. Just a simple goodbye and a sincere thank you. But inside the CEO, a door had opened. And once opened, it could not close. She walked out of the restaurant feeling lighter. Not weaker, stronger in a different way. Strong in softness. Strong in humility. Strong in remembering that power didn't make her more human than others. It simply gave her more chances to show it. And soon, the rest of the world would begin to notice the quiet change in her. A shift not in power, but in heart. The morning after the big dinner, the city felt different to the billionaire CEO. It was the same skyline, the same traffic, the same emails piling up on her phone. But inside, something had shifted. She woke up early, not because of a meeting, but because her mind would not rest. Images kept replaying in her head. The busy restaurant, the quiet waitress, the moment when a simple, honest sentence made the powerful woman feel small. Not because anyone insulted her, but because she saw herself clearly for the first time in a long while. She sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. She saw the designer shoes beside the door and the neat suits hanging in the closet. None of it brought comfort. She thought about the fear she had built around her. She had once told herself it was respect. Now she understood it was not. People feared her words, her anger, her cold silence. They did not admire the person. They only reacted to the position. The waitress had not done that. She had spoken to her like a human speaks to another human. Calm, kind, honest. And that honesty had gone straight through the layers of pride and protection that the CEO had worn for years. She decided she could not let the moment pass. She got dressed in simple clothes, something she had not done in a long time. No driver, no assistant. She wanted to walk. The morning air felt fresh against her face, like the world was reminding her that it did not revolve around money or titles, but around people breathing the same air, walking the same streets. When she reached the restaurant, the place was still quiet. Staff were setting tables and stacking cups. The smell of coffee drifted through the room. The waitress was wiping a counter, humming to herself, a little tune that made the space feel gentle. The CEO paused at the door. For the first time, she felt nervous about approaching someone. She had faced boardrooms full of hard questions, news reporters, and investors. Yet this simple moment felt bigger. She walked in slowly. The waitress looked up. For a second, there was surprise on her face. Then she gave a small, warm smile. Not a forced one. A real one. "Good morning," the CEO said softly. "Good morning," the waitress replied, in the same simple tone she always used. There was a pause. The CEO searched for the right words, and for once in her life, she did not try to fill the silence with power. She let it be. "I came to say thank you," she finally said. "And I came to say I am sorry." The waitress did not rush to answer. She listened. That alone made the CEO feel lighter. "I have spent years thinking that being feared means being strong," the CEO continued. "But yesterday you showed me that I have been pushing people away. You did not hurt me. You just held up a mirror. And I did not like what I saw. But I needed to see it." The waitress rested the cloth on the counter and folded her hands. Her voice was calm. "Sometimes people forget themselves," she said. "Busy life can do that. But it is never too late to remember." The CEO nodded. She felt something new inside her. Not guilt alone. Not shame alone. Something like relief. It felt good to stop pretending she had it all figured out. They sat at a small table near the window. The sun was rising, painting the street in soft light. The CEO listened as the waitress spoke about life from her side of the counter. How people were kind, rude, tired, joyful, all mixed together. How a few words could change someone's whole day. How everyone carried stories no one else could see. The CEO did not interrupt. She did not give advice. She simply listened. It was a skill she realized she had forgotten. When the coffee arrived, the CEO reached for her wallet. Then she stopped. She remembered something the waitress had said the night before about dignity. So she placed the bill on the table, nothing extra to make a show. Just enough. Respectful. Before leaving, she asked one last question. "Would it be all right if I came back here sometimes? Not as the CEO, but just as me." The waitress smiled. "Anyone is welcome. Titles stay at the door anyway." Those words stayed with her all the way back to her office. That afternoon, the staff noticed the change before anyone spoke about it. The air in the building felt less heavy. When the CEO walked through the lobby, people did not drop their eyes to the floor the way they had before. She greeted the front desk worker by name. She thanked the cleaner who was polishing the glass. Not as a performance. Just natural, simple words from one person to another. In the next leadership meeting, she did something she had never done. She apologized. She told her team she had not been the leader they deserved. She acknowledged the fear in the room and said it was not what she wanted anymore. Some faces were confused. Some were cautious. A few softened. Trust does not return in a day. She knew that. But a door had opened. She made it a habit to ask questions and then actually listen to the answers. She visited departments she had never seen in person. She sat with employees in the cafeteria. She listened to their stories. She laughed more. She allowed herself to be wrong sometimes. And she said thank you often, not only for big things, but for the small daily efforts that kept everything running. News of the change spread quietly at first. Then more people began to talk. Not because they were afraid, but because they were surprised. The woman who had once been a shadow others avoided was now someone who noticed when people were tired or when they did something well. She still made tough decisions. She was still firm when needed. But there was warmth now, and it changed everything. One evening, months later, she returned to the same restaurant. It was busy, full of voices and the sound of dishes. She waited like everyone else. No special table. No rush. When the waitress came over, they shared a smile like old friends who did not need many words. "How have you been?" the CEO asked. "Good," the waitress said. "Life has its ups and downs. But there is always something to be grateful for." They talked about little things. The weather. The new desserts on the menu. A plant the waitress was trying to keep alive at home. Simple topics, but they felt real. The CEO realized that she no longer needed grand conversations to feel important. Sometimes being present was enough. As she left, she looked around the room. She saw strangers laughing together. She saw a child trying to drink from a glass that was too big. She saw a couple holding hands, tired from work but happy to sit side by side. She saw the staff moving like a quiet team, each one with a role that mattered. It hit her then. Power was never meant to build walls. It was meant to open doors. The waitress did not make her feel ridiculous because she wanted to shame her. She helped her see how ridiculous it was to forget kindness, to forget that everyone is human. That lesson was more valuable than any deal, any building, any headline. Over time, the CEO became known for something new. Not fear, not cold success, but calm fairness. People still respected her, but in a different way, in a better way. They respected the person as much as the position. She stayed in touch with the restaurant. Sometimes she would drop off flowers for the staff. Sometimes she would sit in the corner with a notebook and write down thoughts. The waitress kept being herself, steady, grounded, kind. She did not want fame or attention. She only wanted to do her job well and go home with a peaceful heart. In the end, this was not a story about a billionaire alone. It was about two people who crossed paths at the right time. One had money, power, and fear around her. The other had little money but a strong sense of dignity and a simple, honest voice. And in that meeting, both lives changed. One remembered who she wanted to be. The other stayed steady, reminding everyone that kindness is not loud, but it is strong. The world outside kept moving, fast and noisy. But inside, something gentle had grown. The CEO learned that it is better to be understood than feared, better to be kind than perfect, and better to listen than to shout. And the waitress? She kept serving coffee with the same smile, never needing to prove anything. She had always known the truth. Respect begins when we see each other as equals, no matter the title, no matter the clothes, no matter the bank account. This was the quiet ending of their story. No big speeches, no bright lights, just a lasting change in the way one woman led her life, all because another woman spoke with courage and heart.